Like other team sports leagues in America, the NBA holds an annual draft. For those who don't know, the draft occurs between seasons. Each franchise gets to select players from college or maybe foreign leagues to play for their team. In most league drafts, the team with the worst record the previous season gets to pick first, and the team that won the title picks last, with all the other teams going in order from worst to best records. Pretty simple, sounds fair. But the NBA had a problem. See, a single player can so dramatically change the course of a franchise's success. Think LeBron James, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Magic Johnson, Shaquille O'Neal. Because of this, as teams realized that they had no shot to make the playoffs, they started tanking, intentionally losing games in order to get that number one pick. Fans hated this. The NBA hated this. It got ugly. Commissioner David Stern had an idea on how to fix this. The NBA would hold a lottery. Every single team that missed the playoffs would be put into a drawing for who got what pick. That way, teams would keep playing hard all the way to the end of the season. Pretty simple, sounds fair. The the NBA draft lottery debuted in 1985, and it wasn't simple, and to many people, it wasn't fair. The clear-cut number one choice that year was going to be Patrick Ewing, a generational talent at center, and the 1980s was still in the era of basketball where the center was king. Ewing not only was the most dominant and talented player in all of college basketball that year, he was beautiful, like a statue, like an artist's rendering of the pinnacle of human physique. On the night of the draft lottery in 1985, envelopes with each team's name inside were placed in a tumbler, and Commissioner David Stern drew them out one at a time. And who should he draw for the number one overall pick? The New York Knicks. Future superstar Patrick Ewing was going to the league's largest media market, even though New York did not have the worst record. And wasn't that strange that the commissioner would invent a draft lottery in a year where New York City stood to benefit from it? Conspiracy theorists claimed Stern had the New York Knicks envelope frozen before that drawing, so he knew which one to pull out for number one. Stern denied this, of course, and we'll never know for sure, but we do know that Ewing was a superstar with a Hall of Fame career for the Knicks, and he was a beautiful man. The reason I bring this basketball legend into my intro for The Exorcist III is because Ewing makes a cameo during a dream sequence. There are lots of cameos in this scene. Sam Jackson, the Lennon sisters, Fabio, and Patrick Ewing. He's dressed in white and is credited as the Angel of Death as he deals us tarot cards. Director William Peter Blatty was born in New York City, possibly a big Knicks fan, but more importantly, Blatty was a graduate of Georgetown University, where Big Pat played his most legendary ball. Hi, Cecil.
Hi, Jeffrey.
Which celebrity do you want to meet first in heaven?
Oh, which celebrity?
You only get to choose between Fabio,
Mm,
Patrick Ewing, and
Okay.
Sam Jackson.
I mean, clearly Samuel L. Jackson, even though he's not dead.
Oh, no, it's true.
I mean, okay, going with like celebrities that are dead
Hmm.
currently, like if I were
Yes.
to die today and the celebrity is dead already. Ooh, I mean, because I feel like so many celebrities are going to be kind of douchey and
Yeah.
probably wouldn't be in heaven. So, there's like your John Lennons, your
Hmm.
Salvador Dalis, but they're probably dicks, right?
Those guys kind of seemed like dicks.
You know? So, like maybe someone chill, like Abraham Lincoln. We'll go with Abraham Lincoln. How about
I bet
that?
he was pretty chill.
Yeah.
You know who I think is probably chill is Prince. Like he
Oh
seems
my
like a
God, really?
diva, but I bet if you got him in
Oh,
the
yeah.
right environment, I bet he's chill as fuck.
That's probably it. Like if Prince is cool with you, totally
Right.
awesome. But if
Yes.
Prince is not cool with you, you have no shot.
Yes. And I think as a fellow performer, there might be some mutual respect there for the two of
Oh
you.
yeah.
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 Maybe. I mean, he could be an absolute raging a-hole. I don't know.
Who knows? Maybe he's chilled out now that he's in heaven.
I want chill Prince. That's who I want to meet.
Yeah.
Okay, so we we covered The Exorcist III,
Yeah.
which you had promised me was pretty scary, and I would agree. It is a very scary movie.
It
It's
is.
got
I
some
think it
very
is.
good jump scares, some real good creep factor sort of things happening. Surprisingly unbloody, with one very, very key exception. But
Yeah.
most of the it's not a splatter film.
No. No, no,
It's not
no.
a slasher in that we're not watching. knives go into people's flesh or whatever.
Like I think of it as like satanic Silence of Lambs.
Yes.
It's more police procedural than anything
Yeah.
else,
Yeah.
except the devil plays a part.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I had a lot of fun with this movie in a way that I didn't with the first Exorcist movie. And I think it is very interesting that William Peter Blatty, I think, wanted things a lot different for that first
Oh
movie.
yeah, yeah.
And so it's interesting to see his take on this story. It was also interesting because I had to look this up. There's a moment, and hopefully those who are listening to this episode are have our had listened to our Exorcist episode. Uh, but there's a moment where Lieutenant Kenderman refers to Father Karras from the first film as
Yes.
his best friend. And I'm like, what? No, no, you absolutely, you two barely knew each other. But
Yeah, yeah,
apparently,
yeah.
according to the books, they were very close. In
Sure.
the original film, Lieutenant Kenderman is barely in this thing at all. And
Oh
it
yeah.
leaves, and I remember it leaving me wondering, what would a procedural look like? What would this look like from the police point of view? Well,
Well,
here we
that's
go.
I mean, that's all, you know me, Jeffrey. I'm always like, horror movie happens. The last scene, the police roll up and they, take the final girl, they wrap a blanket around her shoulder and they put her in the back of an ambulance. And I'm like, I want to see the police write up
Hmm.
on the 9 dead bodies at Camp Crystal Lake, or, and in this case, I, I guess you get it,
Uh-huh.
sort of. But even at the end of this, even more confounding. How are you going to explain this, Lieutenant Kinderman?
Right? I had that same question. The other thing I wanted to say, just overarching about this film, is William Peter Blatty strikes me as such, like, I don't know if film nerd is the word for it, but
Okay.
like a New Yorker nerd. Do you know
Oh,
what I
sure,
mean?
sure,
Like
sure.
he's
Culturally elite.
culturally elite, and he does pop into these moments in this film of now I got to put the cleverest dialogue here possible. It's like Quentin Tarantino syndrome,
Sure.
and I didn't find it charming for this movie because I like this movie being tense and scary and suspenseful and not cutesy in a smarty pants sort of way.
Uh-huh.
But I did appreciate what he was doing. He makes a reference to Powell and Pressburger's The Red Shoes in it.
Yes.
I even think
Uh-huh.
he makes a reference to Child's Play because Brad Dourif is in
Yes.
it. Yes.
Yeah.
Anyways, good on him. I appreciated it, but was irritated by it.
He's just amusing himself.
He is. That's the phrase. Well, it's Georgetown, 1990.
Yep.
We are 15-ish years removed from the last time we skipped Exorcist 2, but 15
We
years
skipped
removed from the
Exorcist 2.
first
I've
movie.
seen The Exorcist 2 once, and I
Mhm.
remember very little about it. I just remember there's a lot of bugs in it, if I remember correctly.
Great.
But this movie pretends like that never happens.
Yeah. We we sort of open on like montage of here's Lieutenant Kenderman played by George C. Scott. He's remembering his pal Father Karras. We've got Father Dyer, who was a character in the
Yep.
first movie, also having memories of Father Karras as well, who was the man who like took the spirit out of Regan and then
Yes.
hurled himself to his death down these stairs in Georgetown. But we've got this like figure moving through the
I love
streets.
this. This dream sequence.
The killer cam being like preacher, like coming into the church, like the doors of this church like burst open, papers fly everywhere. Jesus's eyes on the cross open wide.
Uh-oh. That's not good. I
That
mean, I don't really go to church, not being a Christian, but are Jesus statues like those like dolls that like when they
uh-huh.
sit up, their eyes open and then they lay down and their eyes closed? Is that
They're
is that
like
a
they're like those gag pins where if you turn it upside down, all the bikini falls
oh, the
off.
clothes fall off?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. No, I love this dream sequence because it's you don't even know it's a dream sequence, but it's like this like the camera's floating through the streets of Georgetown and there's just like a single kid with a rose and just like staring wide-eyed at whoever the camera is, and then there's like a priest just running full tilt in the background.
Uh-huh.
And then again, from like that priest must have run all the way around the block and then runs at full tilt. You're like, oh, shit is not good in Georgetown right now.
And we get this the voice of this Pazuzu character is, saying like the it's like I have dreams of tumbling down the stairs
Yeah.
to my death. Okay, then we cut to there's a crime scene over by the docks. We don't see exactly what it is. We just see a woman sobbing. We presume son or husband. We're gonna learn it was her son that is
Yep.
dead
A
on
lot
these
of
docks.
crew teams, just
Uh-huh.
doing their early morning rowing.
Yeah. Oh, that's really it's that you point that out too because this movie is think of an era when we were trying a lot harder to understand race in film.
Oh, sure.
And like this kind of like all white and it's race and class overlapping, right? But like the idea
Yeah.
of like being on a crew team, probably at Georgetown
Oh, yeah.
University, is probably a white person thing and a rich white person thing at that. And then here we have a black boy who
Yeah.
is
He's
murdered.
part of a boys club, like the
Hmm.
police boys club. So,
Yep.
and having lived in DC, the racial divide is pretty apparent.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
class divide is pretty apparent.
Yeah.
Like Georgetown is like one of the only areas where, I think it's like I don't think that they have a metro stop because they didn't
Wow.
want, the poors coming into Georgetown. You
Right.
have to like take a
Right.
metro stop like one over and then walk into Georgetown.
Yeah.
And
Racism
it
in
might also
city
be because
design.
it's a historic purposes, but
Yeah.
that was always the
Yeah.
assumption with like stay out.
Uh-huh.
Stay out, poor people.
And when I say this is kind of an era when we're really starting to really get into race in film. We've been doing race in film for a long time. I
Sure.
only mean to say that like we're getting above just skin color as a social barrier and getting into
Sure.
the fact of like all of the other factors that go into that. The way in which
Right, right, right.
Lieutenant Kinderman like chastises his employees for like racist police efforts.
Yeah.
We have a moment where his mother-in-law just
Oh my
is
God.
just so openly
Racist granny.
anti-Semitic. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got
It's it's a legit like I hated it that they have this line in there, but it's a legit funny line when his wife is like, "Yes," and my mother totally at the diner today was like, "There's so many Jews in here." Or no, these Jews are crazy.
I don't
And
know. No,
grandmother
no, no,
goes,
no, no, even better. No, it's like we went to this diner in Virginia and they served us grits. And I said, these crazy Jews. I was like, what?
and they get onto her, and she's like, "Well, they are."
I was like,
And I was
I
like,
don't
"What?"
know if grits is really associated as a Jewish.
Hmm.
I don't know
Hmm.
if I mean
Biscuits and
racist granny,
gravy. Yeah.
racist granny. I don't know what you're up to,
Hmm.
but you do save your granddaughter's bacon in the end.
Uh-huh. Okay, so we've also got the relationship between Kenderman and Dyer, Father Dyer, Lieutenant
Yes.
Kenderman. And these are two men
This
who,
is, oh my God.
yeah,
They are they love just nagging on each other.
they really do. I think Blatty really does have down like old guys who are friends with
Oh
each
yeah.
other.
It's grumpy old men.
It is
It's
grumpy
grumpy
old
old
men.
men with Satan.
And I think it's very sweet that their annual tradition is to go watch It's a Wonderful Life together. It's really
Nice.
cute. And also Kinderman after the film, they he it's what a weird story. He tells Dyer, "Can we just go out to eat? I don't want to go home yet because my mother-in-law likes to make carp, and he's like, and it's a lovely fish. It tastes great. I really enjoy
Carp.
carp, but she
Carp.
has to
Who
buy
eats
it
carp?
live, and she
It's
keeps the
carp.
live carp in our bathtub, and I don't want to go home until that carp is gone."
Because it's just swimming up and down,
Hmm.
up and down. And mostly this is just like George C. Scott chewing the scenery.
Yes,
Wild.
I forget. It's easy to forget with George C. Scott how funny he is.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I like whenever I think George C. Scott, I always think Doctor Strangelove.
I do too,
And
but
he's so funny in that.
he's so
But
funny.
but he kind of earned that reputation of being like the toughest of the tough guys.
Hmm. Okay, so we've got their relationship. They both are still like dealing with the death of Karis, so they're both still in mourning off of this. And this is where we learn the story of Thomas Kentry. He's a black teenager. He's the boy holding the rose that we saw in the opening dream
Yeah.
sequence. And it's this horrifying description of his death, of that he was decapitated. This
Yep.
murderer decapitated him and then replaced his head with a head from a statue of Jesus that they then painted with menstrual blackface.
And then crucified him on rowing oars.
Right. So that's an image that
Okay, so what does
is
Dexter think about this?
right. I was gonna say I wrote down, I was like, that's a hard image to get out of your head. And then
Yeah.
later they show us that image. Like,
Oh, they do.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we're gonna meet Father Canavan. And Father Canavan is doing confession.
Oh, that's right. Oh, yes.
And Father Canavan is doing a confession, and we never see the person confessing, but we hear her voice.
Well, we see like an old
Oh, that's
lady
right. We do see
in
her in,
black
yeah.
being led down the street by a nurse or a
Uh-huh.
caretaker, and they both look a little, dazed or
Yep.
whatever. But yeah, but we assume it's this old lady
Yeah.
going to make her confession.
And this is a super horrifying scene
Oh my
and
God.
also very funny too. Like the way it's constructed is great. Because she's like, I just have to confess everything, like every little thing. And she like names a little thing. And he's like, well, of course, just know that the Lord forgives us for everything. She's
Just
like,
start
well,
at the beginning.
she's like, well, I have like 17 confessions, so we'll just start
Okay.
with the small one first. I cut a waitress's throat near Candlestick Park.
Uh,
And then she starts
uh,
cackling.
Eek.
Eek.
And then you just see the priest go like with his mouth open,
Uh-huh.
like silent scream.
Uh-huh.
Cut to police.
Yep.
Or no, it's like cut to
A
like a little
screaming
pool of
woman.
blood. Yeah, yeah, screaming woman as like blood pools out of the confessional booth.
Yeah, because this like and it's a woman, like her husband and little girl or something like, and this woman found
Yeah,
the dead body. So Kinderman notices on the body under the white blanket that the finger had been cut off. One
yeah,
of the fingers was cut off.
yeah. He keeps like in like we. I don't think we see him do this in the first one, maybe not, but definitely in this one. And then later, when Dyer gets his, it becomes this whole thing of like he checks both hands
Hmm.
of the cadaver, but we don't know why just yet.
No, we don't. We don't know the story about that. We do learn from his, he's got these detectives that work for him, and they done some work, and they said coroner came back with the report, and the that boy Kentry did not die from the decapitation.
Yes,
He was drugged. They named the drug. I didn't write it down, whatever, but they named the drug as used to paralyze the
yeah.
body,
And
which
it's what they
leaves,
use for like for capital punishment.
yes, it's the one that like means that you cannot use your body, but you are still fully conscious
Yeah.
of what's happening. You just cannot do anything with it. And so he was basically cut apart while still alive. So Kinderman goes, oh, Dyer ends up in the hospital. Father Dyer ends up in the hospital.
Yeah.
We assume it's never really specified, but we assume it's probably something just related to being an older person and having health
Yeah.
issues and an ongoing something. Maybe he had a mild heart attack, who knows? But this is
Kinderman brings him a penguin.
he brings him a big stuffed penguin. The
Father
dialogue
Dyer
here,
complains. Father Dyer complains about having all last week's women's wear daily.
uh-huh. I wrote down that this is like if you asked an AI generator, like, create a dialogue between two people in the style of Tarantino, and it's between two people who only read the New Yorker. That's just
Oh
kind of
my
like
God.
the vibe of this
Like
of this.
Tarantino meets David Mamet meets Grumpy Old Men.
Uh-huh, basically. It's it's just so like 70s, 80s. I think also what he's going for is I think there's like a kind of the classic His Girl Friday fast talking police
Yes.
procedural era of
Yes.
filmmaking.
Yep.
And I think that's what he's going for here. And I think that works. I just think
Snappy patter. Yeah, snappy patter.
it's so out of left field compared to the rest of the film
Sure.
that it is odd. But I
Well, and
like, you
I think it's also important to note that like both of these men are kind of in denial about what happened 15 years ago
yeah,
with Father Karras. Like there's one cute interesting little detail. It's like, oh, today's the day I take Father Dyer out to go see It's a Wonderful Life because he always gets depressed on this day. And then Father Dyer, separate scene, is talking to like somebody at church, and he's like, "Oh, today is the day that I take my friend Lieutenant Kenderman out because he always gets depressed." So it's
uh-huh.
like they're both like neither one of them want to admit that they're the sad one
Yeah, yeah.
because greatest generation and all.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, "Oh no, feelings. Uh-oh, we can't talk about that, but we can have snappy dialogue
Mm-hmm.
that kind of glosses over things."
Think what this scene does so well for me is the to your what you were just saying, Cecil, is that it just adds to the relationship of how much they need each other. It's very
Yeah,
similar in like kind of a classic rom-com setup where like two people really love each other, but they don't know how to show it. And that's what you have
sure.
is you have two men who really love each other and don't maybe don't quite know how to show it in the way that a lot more emotionally secure people would want them to show it, you know.
And they both have like really hard jobs.
Yes.
Like or very emotionally taxing jobs, I would say.
Yeah.
Kinderman is like investigating these like horrific crimes. Father Dyer, you get the impression Father Dyer's like he's a good priest, but it's kind of it's not over it, but he's a little weary
Yeah.
of the job. And so like this is their chance to like kind of take out some of their aggression on each other in a playful way that they can't at work.
Yes. We also learn from the police detectives that Father Canavan was he had the exact same paralyzing drug in his system.
Yes.
So
To
that's
the
a
exact precise dosage.
yeah, that we're dealing with a real expert here. And they're like, well, of course, so we must be dealing with a new serial killer. There's a reference to early in the film, there's a reference to the Gemini killer who was killed, who was
Yes.
executed 15 years prior. So Gemini killer is no longer with us, but there must be some new serial killer happening.
Yeah.
Anyways, but they find that the fingerprints at both scenes do not match.
Uh-oh. So two different killers.
Wow.
That's unusual.
Now we get to, I think, the scene for me that puts this movie over the top, that makes it so like memorable and endearing, and it is the train station heaven purgatory
Yes.
dream sequence.
Defending your life
Yes,
in
yes.
heaven. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
absolutely.
I think this is also like I'm not an expert on uh Powell and Pressburger, but I feel like
There
there's
is. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Is there
It's
I feel like I'm missing
what is
something.
it called? It's where like an
Um
airman dies,
yes.
but like kind of gets to go back for a day and falls in love, and then gets called back to heaven, and he essentially has to like. But yes, very much that.
Yeah, and
God, what is that movie called? Oh, that's going to drive me crazy.
this is a classic sort of idea of heaven in that it's a gathering place or that you arrive in heaven, you're standing on clouds, you get through the
Yeah,
gates, you're allowed in heaven, you could just walk around, see anybody, do whatever, you kind of have your own shape and form, but you're in white robes with angel wings.
absolutely.
But this is like a bus station that has been turned into a temporary housing for
Yeah,
some type of like a FEMA emergency or
Yeah,
something.
it feels like a refugee kind of camp in
Hmm.
that people are just like there's angels and there's people that are all just kind of like milling about. Nobody seems upset, but they're all just kind of like nobody has anywhere to go or anything to do
Yeah.
except, be celebrities like, you know, Patrick Ewing
Uh-huh.
turning over tarot cards
Uh-huh.
or but what's crazy is that Kinderman runs into the boy who was killed and
Yep.
he's got like his head has been like stapled back on.
Uh-huh.
And then he sees Father Dyer, and Father Dyer's head has been stapled back on.
Uh-huh. And he was like, "Are you having this dream too?" And Father Dyer is like, "No, Bill, I'm not dreaming."
Uh-oh.
And that next morning, Kinderman learns that Father Dyer was murdered and also decapitated in his hospital room.
And
And
exsanguinated.
what a great word.
I
All
believe
of
that's
his
the right
blood.
word.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all of
to
his
have the
blood
blood
removed.
removed, exsanguinated.
I like that there's a specific word for having all of your blood removed, just in the same way that we have defenestrated, which is
I
to
know.
be
Yeah, right.
thrown from a window. But yes,
It's
he's been
so wild.
exsanguinated
It's
into
so
individual jars.
yeah, and it's like they're all like perfectly laid out in like little rows right next to him, and the cops are like can't even. They're like, there's no fingerprints, there's no smudges. All the blood is here and there, and there was a little bit left, but he used that to write on the wall. What's the writing on the wall? And they pulled on this black tarp, and it says, "It's a Wonderful Life." Ugh.
Woof.
That's a message, Lieutenant
Uh-huh.
Kinderman, for you.
Amazing. Amazing sequence. And then Kinderman calls for a lockdown of the hospital.
Yeah,
No one in or out except for emergencies. And then he interviews this nurse.
I love her.
She's my favorite character in this
She
movie.
she she's like, I think she's listed as Nurse X, I think. Or no, 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 she's Nurse Allerton. That's it.
Yes, yeah, Nurse Emily Allerton.
Yep.
And
Amazing.
she's so good. Nancy Fish, who doesn't even have like a link in her name on Wikipedia, plays her. The, she her first scene, she very much gives off a vibe of if this were like just a straightforward murder mystery,
Yeah.
this is the first person the writer wants you to suspect of doing
Oh,
something
sure.
wrong. Because
But
she's
she's giving very Nurse Ratchet.
yes, totally.
Like ball busting, like I'm not here for your bullshit, nurse.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
she's also kind of the only person, like, and she was the only person on duty when Father Dyer, she was like, "Did you check on it?" Like, I gave him his meds at 5. Then I went outside. And then I sat down at my desk. Were you outside at the desk? Kind of was giving her the third degree. And she's like, then I came in at 6, dead.
yep.
Did you see anybody? No. Did you hear anybody? No.
She did see one person she saw no one in the
Yes.
room, but she saw one person in the hallway, and that was Mrs. Clelia. She was in the
Uh-oh.
hallway unconscious, and I saw her as I was on my way to give Father Dyer his 6 a.m. meds, which is when I found him.
I'm like, okay, well, let's go talk to Mrs. Clelia.
Miss Clelia, she hears dead people.
Yes, she does.
And
Through her imaginary radio.
another just incredible, like, clever scene. This movie definitely, I think, tips pretty hard into let's use particularly old people who have
Yeah.
dementia
Yeah.
as scary,
As
um,
creepy.
as creepy.
Which I think is kind of a callback to the first one
Yes.
because there's so many dreams, like Father Karras has this like very guilt-ridden conscience about putting his mother into like a state-sponsored, like a state nursing home. And she is, just doesn't understand where she is, why she's there. We just know that she is sad.
Uh-huh.
And Father Karras thinks completely blames himself.
Right.
So I think they kind of took that and then like upped the scariness factor of that.
Yeah. This movie backs off of the medical horror of the first movie, but I think it's certainly still aware of these places aren't the kindest.
Yeah.
So he interviews Mrs. Clelia. She says, I have this radio. She's holding nothing.
Are you the radio repairman?
I am. I am the radio repairman. Can you see this radio? I sure
You see
can.
this radio? Yes, I can. Well, this is a telephone, you dumb shit. I shouldn't say that. That's okay. A lot of people would just get confused. You have a nice face, though.
So there's another character named, is it Dr. Temple?
I think Dr. Temple. Dr. Temple is such a mystery to me
Uh-huh.
because he's another one, like you said, like in a murder mystery setting. Dr. Temple is like a loose cannon.
Yes.
Like his office is a little bit odd. He's very Jungian psychedelic.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a portrait of himself, even though his hands are like fucking creepy. I don't know if you noticed this, but his hands are like claws.
Oh no.
I don't think it's supposed to be. I was just like, ooh, sir, manicure, look into it. But what's wild is that like he is portrayed as like this chain smoking, neurotic psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever, that is like as neurotic as his patients.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he
someone who could theoretically commit a crazy murder.
mm-hmm. Yeah, he was giving me vibes of Hellraiser 2 a little like that's an
Yes.
extreme example of like
Oh yeah.
head of psych ward who
Well, that dude was clearly evil.
that guy
Like
that man was like evil villain
evil
mastermind.
Doctor Evil.
Yeah.
Doctor Temple is more just a loose screw, just
Yeah.
something. And it's the scene. I don't know if it's this first scene where we kind of meet him and he's given Lieutenant Kinderman the tour. Seems relatively normal. It's later when we realize he's rehearsing
Yes.
lines that he's going to say to Kinderman about this patient he has down in the basement.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, I've seen this movie like a couple times, and I was like, what is happening here?
Uh-huh.
This is wild. Do people do this? Like, what a weird choice for a directing,
Uh-huh.
writing standpoint and an acting standpoint.
Yeah.
But it just adds to this feeling of like there's something up with Dr. Temple.
And Dr. Temple, I think like anxious and neurotic, I think captures him perfectly because I mean the reason he's rehearsing those lines is that he wants to get Pazuzu's story exactly
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
because he's the guy in a mob film who's like, yes, yes, mob boss, whatever you need. Like I
Yeah.
clearly do not need you killing me or my family. I
Yeah.
will work
I'll
for
say,
you and
yep.
whatever you need, I'm gonna get it done.
Absolutely.
He's a lackey, right? Like
Yeah.
he's a yeah.
Yeah. He's the devil's lackey. And like
Yeah.
it becomes, and I think it's kind of like almost a throwaway line later
Hmm.
after Dr. Temple kills himself
Yeah.
that they're like, oh, Dr. Temple,
Yeah.
I was gonna make his life a living hell. I had stuff planned for him,
Yeah.
but it never goes into any specifics as to like what Dr. Temple's role in all of this
Yeah.
was going to be.
Yeah, he seemed like a perfectly reasonable kind of Renfield type of character that the devil
Absolutely a
needed
Renfield.
yeah. So they go to what they refer to as the Dr. Temple refers to as the disturbed ward, which is in
Okay.
the basement of this hospital.
It's so Silence of the Lambs, this, or like low budget Silence of the Lambs.
It is. It's funny because this came out like the year before Silence of the
Yeah.
Lambs. And we get a real, we get a real Hannibal Lecter sort of thing.
Yeah.
Although this is a few years after Manhunter, which was the original
Yes.
Hannibal Lecter film came out. So Manhunter was based off Hannibal, right? And then
Yes.
Silence.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's the Red Dragon sort of story.
Red Dragon. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. Anyhow, uh, there's a brief moment where we hear a monologue from, I'm presuming this is Titus Andronicus from one of the cells because he mentions later that he likes Titus, or is this Macbeth?
No, it's John Donne, I think.
Oh, it
Death Be Not
is.
Proud. It's Death Be Not Proud. The Manita
Oh,
Babies. Yeah, it's a sonnet by John Donne.
man, should have taken more English classes.
I saw Wit. Listen, I love to
Oh,
play Wit.
there you go. And there's a moment where we see this mental patient's face, and he just says, "I was only 21 when I died."
Yeah.
So,
It,
all right, we got
it's
something.
something's up. And it's like Kinderman's down there and he's just like walking through the hall and he just hears, Bill?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the kind of creep factor that is throughout this movie. It's not until the end. We're going to talk about the end and
Yeah.
the complete disaster that is.
Uh-huh.
But this movie throughout is this like eerie, creepy, quiet, creepy that I really like. And I
Yeah.
remember liking this movie a lot because it was kind of in contrast to the sort of like tits and chainsaws of the 80s,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And this movie is very much not that.
Yeah. When Kinderman shows interest in wanting to talk to this guy, but they get called back upstairs, urgent, and it is basically the director of the hospital
Yeah.
who is.
It's
This is
like,
a
you
great.
can't
I think
lock
this is
this
a great
hospital
scene,
down.
by the way. Like, I think this is
Yeah.
an awesome scene to show, which is, what the fuck is your problem locking
Yeah.
down my hospital?
Yeah.
One, like, you want to create more panic amongst the
Yeah.
people here?
I've
That's a
got
way to do
patients
it.
here. You've got cops tromping up and down the hallways.
And two, you never had my permission to be like digging around. Like, I need a lawyer. I don't need
Yeah.
your bullshit.
I do kind of think it's funny. He's like, "Have you ever heard of malpractice?" I was like, "I don't think you can sue a cop for malpractice." I think they're like people are going to sue me for malpractice. But in my
Yes.
mind, it was like, come at you.
So he brings up to this director, Kinderman does, to this hospital director, and he's like, "Do you know the Gemini killer?" And he's like, "Yeah, he died. We killed him off 15 years
Yeah.
ago." And he's like, "Yeah, but here's the thing. You know this, here are his calling cards. Here are his
Yeah.
like three different things that he always does. We put those out in the press because we were looking for and they're false. Because only the true Gemini killer would have, if anyone had confessed or said something, then we would know it was a real Gemini murder, not a copycat. And these deaths have the correct finger missing and the correct symbol in the correct place on the body that he carves into them. So there's no way this could be anyone other than the
Yeah.
Gemini killer.
Yeah. While also, to George C. Scott, he's also playing My Best Friend Just Died.
Yes. Yeah. So there's this awkwardly inserted scene where they go to this strange man who works in the hospital, showing them hospital tools that
Oh,
they,
yeah.
and one of the tools is like power shears.
Yeah. I mean,
Like,
it's made to chop bones.
yeah, it's a huge set of power shears. I'm like, well, here are Chekhov power shears. We've got
Yeah.
those
There
down.
we
Check
go.
and check.
No. They're like,
And
oh, it just takes a little bit of effort to open them and they close automatically.
and the guy says, Kinderman notices that there's like a date stamped on the shears that are like today's date. And he's like, yeah, they just arrived today. Oh, you had another pair that went missing?
Where'd they
Maybe.
go? Question remains unanswered.
Okay, so we have this got a lot of any movie that's going to have a lot of jump scares has to have a lot of false scares in it too.
Oh, for sure.
So we get a lot here when he goes to see the big priest boss guy, Father Riley.
This scene, but again, this scene is so creepy
It's so
because this
creepy.
this like this priest is ick. Just
Mhm.
like he's like, "Do you need a drink? I need another drink." You're like, "Oh, geez, Father,
Mhm.
whatever. Dial it back a bit."
This is the first moment where we refer to Reagan McNeil from the
Yes,
first movie.
because
And
like Kinderman points out, is like with the exception of like the kid, both Father Dyer and did the other priest have
yeah,
a connection to, yeah, like had a
they
connection
all
to
had,
Reagan as well.
yeah. And yeah, he just couldn't make the connection to Reagan.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, he just couldn't make the connection from Reagan to Kintry, who's the boy who died. The only thing he has is that all of them have a name that starts with K, because Father Dyer's
Yes.
middle name is Kevin. Then we have Father Caravan, Caravan, Caravan. I forget.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm
So,
not. His name isn't on my screen anymore. And then we have Thomas Kintry with a
yeah.
K.
Which is a calling card of the Gemini killer.
Right. Hold on 2 seconds here. I need to solve a cat problem. Hi. Hello. I need you gone. I need you gone. Yeah, that's just not gonna work. Thank you. Somebody is in my bookshelf.
On your Zoom screen, it
Uh,
just looked like you just pulled a cat out of Fabio's hair, is what I just saw.
Amazing. Okay. So they're kind of talking about this is kind of the first moment where Kinderman is actually considering maybe that spirit or whatever it was with
Yeah.
McNeil, maybe there's something there to that. And the priest is like, could be that did
Yeah,
something. I don't
maybe.
know. But then
And
the
then the clock
clock
stops.
stops. Yeah.
I think like literally he's like they put something together and he's like, my God, the clock stops.
Yeah.
And all the lights kind of start flickering, which we kind of that's like a thing from the first one of
Uh-huh.
like the lights flickering, flashing, because the devil is a part-time electrician, part-time contractor.
I do want to say about the clock stopping because I was like, ooh, that really was a good chilly moment. And there's a lot of the most effective jump scares to me in this movie are dead quiet.
Yeah. Well,
The
it's like empty space.
Yeah,
Not like quiet, but not silent. Because then it's like a door will just sort of open. And then
yeah.
like a single page on a desk as if there's a breeze. So like very quiet noises, but not silence.
hmm So he gets up, Kinderman gets up to start investigating. He can hear like faint whispers, lights are flickering. There's a fucking crazy ass statue with like Joker face.
Un No reason whatsoever.
Jack
Yeah,
Nicholson
with
Joker face, by the way.
like
Like,
Jack Nicholson Joker face with a knife.
yes. And then just out of nowhere, jump scare of a woman rushing past and then like throwing this like notebook in
She's
his
like, "Oh, I
hands, being
typed
like,
up the speech." Yeah.
give this to Father Riley. And and he's like, hey, is that Alice? And I'm just writing like, why does this character get a name? Who the fuck is Alice? What's happening?
So it's like it's that thing of like this scene I think is one of the scariest, and then later the scene with the nurse is
Yeah.
like kind of one of the like all time, I would say like maybe even top 10 scares on cinema.
Uh-huh.
And it's because of this, like it's completely normal. Like literally the nurse got up, typed up a thing, left to go make a photocopy of it or whatever. And so she just left her desk is the story.
Yeah.
But what we're actually watching is like you put some creepy music underneath it and it becomes like there's a presence in the room.
Yeah.
Fucking terrifying.
He um he then makes the connection that I think this is still in the Father Riley conversation, wherein Father Karras had been recording Reagan,
That's it.
and
That's it. And then
he
the
was trying to determine, yeah,
boy's mother worked at the sound lab
yep,
where the tapes went to,
yep,
and they're like, "Oh, this is actually not a different language. It's English in reverse."
yes,
That's the connection.
yes, that's totally it. So that's the connection
So all
between
of these people have
Kentry,
heard, yeah, they've
Reagan.
all sort of had some sort of Exorcist one connection.
hmm We introduce, although with wordlessly, just there's some dapper old priest. He's got a
Right.
dead bird on
Father,
his.
Father Morning.
That's right, Father Morning. God, so
Yep.
good.
And like they
Doctor
mentioned, they're
Temple,
like,
Father
oh, we
Morning.
got
Yeah.
this priest. He once did an exorcism in the Philippines and his hair turned white. And then we see a priest with white hair.
Uh-huh.
and he's just doing his priestly thing, and his bird dies, and his cross falls off the wall and starts crying blood.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much all he does until the end of the
That's
movie.
yeah. And also like the sky goes dark and his window flies open and a bunch of shit rushes in, but he's there's kind of a we're showing similar to the Max von Sydow priest in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Exorcist in The Exorcist that there's this unflappableness to him.
Yeah, the like the professional exorcist.
Yes.
And apparently, this was the whole thing, is that like William Peter Blatty had written this book Legion and wanted to just make this movie and call it Legion. And the studio was like, no, The Exorcist is such a big hit. We're gonna have to call it the Exorcist. So we need an exorcist in it. So this Father Morning character is not even a character in the original draft. And the whole
Oh.
thing where he comes in and does the exorcism at the end isn't part of the movie in the original version. It just sort of is like a standoff between Kinderman and the Gemini killer, Father Karras.
Oh,
So there's no
okay.
exorcist in The Exorcist III originally, which is why this Father Morning character is like kind of doesn't do anything. He gets a weird premonition, and then at the very end, he just sort of steps in and is like, I heard that there was a demon down here somewhere.
Yep.
Nobody talks to him, nobody tells him, nobody brings him. He just shows up.
That makes a ton of sense why this ending is the way it is
Yeah,
because it definitely feels taped on. It feels
absolutely.
sewn on like Kintry's head
Yeah,
in heaven, right? Like in
yeah,
Bus Station Heaven. And I wondered if it was a studio decision because the other thing
yes.
that I think that really signifies that it was not part of the movie is the kind of practical effect gore happening in it.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because this movie is so it withholds that gore. It's
Yeah.
kind of like one of those things wherein, sometimes you can, there are occasionally there are stand-up comics that have no cuss words, no blue
Mm,
material in their stuff, but they can dive into very deeply adult topics, right?
sure.
And I think that that's what this movie does in horror, which is rather than like show you the graphic blood and guts of a horror movie, it scares the shit out of you without really ever showing you much more than like blood
Yeah,
seeping across the floor.
yeah.
And here at the end, we're like, shit, we're borderline like Tom Savini here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
In
Like
that
it
death
actually kind
scenes.
of approached I think Hellraiser 2 is a good comparison
Yeah.
for the ending.
Yes, just for the ending. Whereas everything else
Like
is buttoned up.
much closer. Yeah, yeah. Very, very like almost like cop mystery procedural.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well,
But so that's the story with Father Morning. They're like, we got to call it The Exorcist 3, so we need an exorcist.
so back to our procedural. One, we got to go see Mrs. Claley again because her fingerprints were all over those jars of Dyer's
Oh
blood.
no. They're like, hey. And they kind of line up the jars without the blood. They're like, do you remember doing this? Do you remember being in here? Anything? And she's got these like big eyes, and she's like, no, I don't know. I don't like being in here. It's time for soup. I'm ready for my soup.
Then Dr. Temple, this is where we get to the scene of him practicing his speech
Wild.
about the man in isolation tank in cell 11, just the one who had called out Bill earlier. And basically, he's practicing the speech, chain smoking. When Kenderman finally shows up in his office, he does the speech as
Yeah.
is, not after like a good solid 45 second of just fidgeting with the butt of
Oh
his
my God.
cigarette
Yeah.
in the ashtray. So that man in the isolation tank, they picked him up 15 years ago walking around the canal, and he had total amnesia and no ID. Um, and then about he was always in a stupor, like borderline
Yeah.
like brain dead. But then 6 weeks ago, he started to come out of his stupor and he was real fucking violent.
Yeah.
And we have put him into electroshock therapy, which is also, oh, that that drug that's being used on these victims, that
Right.
drug is used in electroshock therapy to like keep your muscles from seizing up. Um, and then Dr. Temple says the thing is, he says he's the Gemini killer. Well,
Well, why not?
so he goes to let's see, where are we at here? Da, 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 to see things. Da, 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 da. Okay, so Kinderman goes down to talk to the man in cell 11.
Right. Because he's already talked to him once before, but we don't see it. We
No,
just see Kinderman kind of go. He says, Bill? We see Kinderman go in and we see Kinderman leave, and he's very shaken up, but we don't know what happened.
no, that's
But
right.
now, after all this information with Dr. Temple, it's like big neon arrows. Go talk to this
Yes.
patient.
And he goes down there, and this man has the face of Damien Karras, Father
Yeah.
Karras.
Yeah.
Karras says, "It's a wonderful life."
Yeah. Oh no.
And now we get the interview with the devil scene, which is great. And event this we have he goes the actor playing it is two actors, right? Because we've
Yeah.
got the
We've
man who
got Jason
plays,
Miller, the
yeah, Jason
original Father
Miller,
Karras,
and we have Brad Dourif.
and Brad Dourif as the sort of Gemini killer. And
Yes.
there's a couple different, I did some research on this. There's a couple different versions of why this is.
Uh-huh.
And essentially, the director said that Jason Miller just wasn't available to do the whole thing. They had shot the first little bit and then he wasn't available. But Brad Dourif kind of tells a different story,
Uh-huh.
that Jason Miller was like a dilapidated alcoholic and couldn't do the long
Oh.
monologues that the Gemini killer is kind of scripted with. So they kind of cast another actor, Brad Dourif, to do that part. But they didn't want to scrap the first part, in which he's kind of more generically the devil rather than the Gemini killer as Jason Miller.
Interesting. I liked that we just get little bits and pieces of Jason Miller in
Yeah.
this, just to
Like
kind
he's
of give
kind of,
us,
it's like the tops and tails. Like we get
yeah,
Jason, like we get Father Karras at the very beginning and then kind of at the very end, but mostly the meat of it
Brad
is Brad
Dourif.
Dourif.
And I think the little bits with Jason Miller by showing us Father Karras's face on this
Yeah.
body, it sort of supposes the idea that, I mean, it just kind of sets up the template that that's who everyone sees, right? He's just some
Yes.
random old man
Yeah.
that they
Yeah.
don't have any ID for. And but by flipping into Dorif, I like that we just switch into like fully I need to see him as somebody who is not a man we know and love, if that
Right.
makes sense. I need
Yeah.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
see the Gemini killer's
A
face.
completely different person.
Yes.
And, like it's kind of, it's like in a play in which we're going to have to suspend our disbelief that
Hmm.
this is not
Yeah.
what, the face we're seeing is not the face that's talking. And I kind of love it.
I did too. I kind of
Mostly
want
just
it
because I think Brad Dourif's performance is like so
spectacular.
nuanced and so multi-leveled that you kind of get the impression like maybe it would not have worked if this was all one actor.
Yeah. Actually, I take back what I said earlier about like Blatty, William Peter Blatty's screenplay kind of having this like New Yorker meets Quentin Tarantino vibe, because there's a shorter way to say that, which is it has a Tony Kushner vibe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this scene,
It has an off-Broadway
this is
vibe.
straight from a Tony Kushner play.
Yeah.
Like what Brad Dourif is doing in his like monologue with bits of dialogue in there with George C.
This is like
Scott,
we're talking like 20 minutes. Like this is a one act play in the middle of this movie
and it's
called The Gemini
fucking
Killer.
incredible. It's
It's
so
great.
good. I was riveted. He was so great. So he's the Gemini killer, James Veneman. And he proves this immediately by reciting details about a murder of a little girl that later
Like
we
little
will,
yellow
Kinderman
ribbons and
will,
a
yeah,
pink dress.
how she was killed, where she was, body was placed. And Kinderman later says in the movie that, like, no one knew that
Yeah,
except those of us that wrote the police
yeah.
report. And so, but he, starts telling the story about how, like, usually I kill at random, but I was obliged to settle a score for a friend on the other side.
Oh my God. I love the way he refers to this is very like kind of like Neil Gaiman Sandman, a little bit of
Hmm.
like the sort of the hellscape, because he's like, he always kind of talks around it. He's like, oh, I got friends. Or he
Uh-huh.
calls them like the cruel ones.
Uh-huh.
I have an old friend
Yeah.
who helped me out. Like it's always so coded in its language. So it's not like, oh yeah, the devil told me to do this.
Uh-huh.
Like it's very classy and it makes it even creepier.
Yeah. He he really wants Kinderman to tell to tell the press that
Yes.
he is the Gemini killer. Not that Kinderman is, but that this man
Yeah, yeah.
talking is the Gemini killer. And he's like, I can't do that. He's like, or I will punish you. And he's like, I'm not gonna do
Yeah.
that. And he says, do you dance? And then he
Oh my God.
sings like an angel
Yeah. Like a
and
little
says,
choir boy.
I like plays. Titus Andronicus is the best. Which I think Titus Andronicus is known as being the
The
bloodiest of all of
bloodiest.
Shakespeare's
Yeah. It's the
plays.
like, I'm gonna get revenge by baking your children into a meat pie play. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
And he says, you're talking to an artist. This is where I was getting very like prior Walter vibes from this
Yeah.
character. So good.
Yeah.
He says, I always hold, did you know that the a decapitated head can still
Oh my
see
God.
for up to 20 seconds after it's been removed from the body, which is why I always hold up a head so that it can see its body.
It's just like just a little thing I like to throw in. And apparently, this was a scene that they actually shot in which one of the priests like that was decapitated. There was a scene in which that was like the studio was like, oh no, that's got to get cut.
Yeah.
So there was, I think there was more disturbing imagery in this
Hmm.
movie that might have gotten taken out.
Hmm. And he also describes that he had this genius idea for all you have to do is if you can get the body turned upside down, you could like
Oh yeah.
basically squeeze all the blood out
Yeah. You put a
manually.
catheter,
Uh-huh. Oh yeah,
just
the
squeeze it
catheter.
up.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Oh.
Ugh. Oh my God. I was watching TV the other day and there was this like TV show on about like vets. It was like a vet in England. And I had to stop watching because I am a baby. So they're like fixing up these dogs and I'm like, I see blood and I'm like, oh no, no, no medical shit. I can't.
No.
So even just talking about like putting a catheter in and like turning and like squeezing, no, too
Mm-mm.
real.
So much. And then eventually Kinderman comes over and just whacks him upside the head,
Yeah.
like backhands him across the head. And he says, oh, I'm getting booed from the gallery, I see.
Oh
Well, then I'll liven things up for you, Lieutenant.
my
Something
Uh-oh.
fun. Because life is fun. It's a wonderful life, in fact.
It's a wonderful life. And he says that, like his whole thing is that he liked killing people at random. That's his whole thing.
Yeah.
But, the priests were very much like he was doing a favor for a friend. He's like, but the next one, I think I get a little treat, a little
Uh-huh.
bonus.
Uh-huh. Kinderman goes back to the mean nurse, and
I love it.
he's really
Oh, yeah. Cause
hurt.
she's pissed. She's like, why does my patient have a broken nose? And
Yes.
you've got, but she's like
You,
stitching him up.
yeah. And he tells her, you're very kind. She goes, no, I'm a bitch.
Hmm.
Which is a great
Total
line.
deadpan.
Total deadpan. She's so good. And then she repeats, save your servant, which is something that the man in cell 11 had
Yeah.
said to her one time. And she sort of mentions that, like, occasionally a voice comes out of him that sounds kind, that
Yeah.
really sounds like it means well, not
Yeah.
violence. And Kinderman goes to the library and checks out a book that has
Oh my God.
exorcism
I love
rites in
this.
it.
This scene is so dumb to me of
Uh-huh.
just like, I mean, I love it, but it's also so dumb of like Kinderman just like walking through a church library with like 200,000 books in it and just
Uh-huh.
happens to like glance at a book that has this one and then just like start flipping open. Like he's no, not looking it up, not asked the librarian. Just like,
I
I have saved your servant. Does that ring a bell? There's no search database. He just happens to like find the right book and then happens to flip it open to the rights for the exorcism.
I in college, so this would have been early college, so it would have been like 1994 or something like that. And I had to it would have been like 95, I think it was. So we're barely on the internet at this
Oh
point,
yeah.
and I really am
Like
not
we
like
have computer databases, like
yes.
things were itemized in a database on
Yeah.
computers, but it was not the World Wide Web
And I
quite.
was doing a report and I was looking for a quote from the film Deer Hunter, and the local
Okay.
Blockbuster did not have Deer Hunter.
Yeah.
I was in College Station, Texas, so there were very little places to go rent movies. So I'd gone to the library. They did not have a copy of the Deer
Nope.
Hunter. They could not really even find much on the Deer Hunter. So then I was trying to find anything about, excuse me. So then I was trying to find, so then I was trying to find anything on the Deer Hunter I could find. And there was so little. And the problem was, I just was like, could I just find reviews of the Deer Hunter?
Yeah.
And it took me the entire night at the fucking Texas A&M library
Yeah.
to find anything. Just because going through
Even to have it just
LexisNexis,
mentioned.
yes, and then you got to go wait on somebody to go pull some shit for you.
Yeah.
So for him to hear "Save Your Servant," walk into this church library and be like, "Oh, of course, it was this John Grisham novel that it
And
came
just
from."
pick up a fucking Bible and turn to the right page. It really did. This moment really did kind of just go, man, that would be such an easy search
Yep.
with the internet these days. And 1990, shot in the dark.
Yeah, absolute shot in the dark. Well, he finds this book. He also, when he goes back home, he's staying up late and reading it in the kitchen. And his daughter, Julie,
Yes. Who
comes
loves to
downstairs.
dance, who's always coming to, or going to dance lessons.
Uh-huh. And she comes in for like a late night snack. So like sleepy, tired, into
Yeah.
the
So she's sort
kitchen
of shuffling in, but she's kind of like that shuffle
is we've seen it.
is similar to like what the old people were doing,
Uh-huh.
but she's not. She's just sleepy and she
Yes,
wants
she's
some
just
night
sleepy.
cheese.
Okay. Now let's get to the young nurse who
Oh my
is
God, this scene, this
Nurse
sequence
Keating.
from end to end, honestly, one of the most terrifying sequences in horror movie, the canon.
I salute I salute Nurse, what's her name? Is it Nurse Keating? I think is
Maybe.
the
Yes,
nurse's
that's
name.
it. Yeah.
I salute Nurse Keating for staying at this job because if I were a
Oh my
nurse at a
God,
hospital
right?
that had a patient in 1 hour time, some killer
That
not
was
only
squeezed dry like a juice
decapitated
box. Yeah.
a patient, but drained all the blood out of it, I'm not working there.
Right?
I will figure out my income later. We'll deal with that when we deal with that. But for her to still keep, I mean, listen,
And work the night shift.
even if I had to stay at that job, I would be like, I want a different wing. Put me in the children's wing. Put me
Well,
wherever.
but here's the thing though. There's cops everywhere,
Yeah.
which is what I love about this scene. It's all about the choreography.
Hmm.
So it's this one long shot of a hallway that has essentially like a couple doors and then the nurse's desk and then, like a little place for the cop to sit and then a couple double doors. But it's like a really long shot. And we just watch this one long shot. And there's like, it's late at night. She's sitting there with the cop is just sitting there right there reading his book.
Uh-huh.
And she hears this kind of like cracking noise.
Yeah.
Doesn't know what it is. And it's late at night and she's kind of like looking around and she hears this cracking noise, like indescribable, kind of like the scene in which the pages were fluttering on the secretary's desk. You're like, why are the pages fluttering? Like,
Uh-huh.
what is this mysterious thing? So she kind of goes to investigate. She turns on the light and it's ice cracking in a glass of water. And then jump scare. Like
Uh-huh.
the scary, loudest jump scare in which a patient comes out of nowhere and is like, "What the fuck are you doing? Giving me
Yep.
to wake me up at 2 o'clock in the morning to give me my damn pills." Like, like such a jump scare.
Uh-huh.
So we're like, "Oh, okay, whew, that was what a release." Back outside, the cop gets tapped on the shoulder by another cop. They're gonna go off and do something, and she goes back to her desk and she's like shaking off the jitters.
Uh-huh.
And she kind of peeks into another room and she's like, okay, that room is, the lights are off. She kind of turns on the lights. Okay, no, fine. And she goes to lock the door and she walks, turns around, and then a figure in white sheets with the fucking
Power
head
clippers.
clippers
Head clippers.
is on her ass in 2.5 seconds.
And the shears are hitting her neck just as she's going off screen.
Oh my God. Oh
And
my
it,
God.
and the position and choreography is the perfect word because the
Yeah.
position of the arms, it's so geometric, this
Yeah.
shot.
And
It's
it's like you
incredible,
only see
shocking.
it. And it's, and what it's, it actually reminds me of that one scene in Signs, because it's
Ah,
huge buildup in which they're trying to you know something is going to happen. You've had a jump scare and you're like, oh, whew, okay, surely that's it. Maybe now there'll be a plot point or something. So we
uh-huh.
think we're done. But you only see this shrouded white figure. And I'm talking like Greek chorus style white shroud, like Ebenezer Scrooge white shroud. And you only see it for like half a second. So you don't even know what you just saw. Like you
Yeah,
just, it's long enough to just sort of register it and then it's out and then it's gone.
yeah.
I remember this scene scared me so hard when I was a kid.
It spooked me good watching this the other night because I had never seen this scene before. I mean, I know she's about to get it.
Yeah. Like, I mean, they've kind of tipped it. They're like, oh, her name it starts with a K.
Yep, yep.
Uh-oh.
And also, just we've watched enough horror movies that, like,
Yeah.
the characters that are gonna get
There's a
theirs.
nurse in a red sweater that's
There's a
like,
90% chance I'm gonna see
yeah,
this woman die. So I'm like,
yeah,
well, brace yourself for, oh, we have the fake jump scare, so now the real jump scare is gonna be slightly different. And the real jump scare is quiet. We don't hear the power shears go off. We
no,
don't hear a scream. We don't see a
no.
struggle. It just is off to another scene immediately.
Yep.
So the detective is explaining to Kinderman that she was cut down the middle, organs removed, bodies stuffed with rosaries and sewn back
What?
up.
Where do you get that many rosaries?
How is he so crafty? I don't
Right?
understand. I mean,
There's a lot
they're
of
in a
this.
Catholic hospital, so there's got to be a bunch of rosaries
But
around.
that many rosaries, like to
Yeah,
stuff a chest cavity with rosaries?
that's a lot, man. That's a lot.
You think you
That's
like, are they like, is the devil just collecting these? Or maybe it's
yeah.
like they're like going around, like, they get Mrs. Clelia to like just sort of collect them all from everybody.
For whatever reason, I just was just in my mind. I was at Chipotle. I was like, can I get rosaries on that?
Can I get extra rosaries?
Extra rosaries. It's going to be $1.25 more. That's
I'm
fine.
filming you, so I want to make sure I get the full amount of rosaries.
God damn it, social media. So then, as we're explaining this, we hear Mean Nurse
Yeah.
call for the lieutenant, and she has found Dr. Temple, who has
Yes.
died by suicide.
Yeah. Like he's overdosed himself with the blah, blah, blah drug.
Yeah,
So 2 deaths in one night.
yeah. I'm for real not working at this hospital
Oh,
anymore.
absolutely not. And needless to say, the Gemini killer is very pleased with himself
Yes.
the next time we see him.
Yeah, he
Kinderman
says,
goes
did
to
you
see
get
him.
my message, Lieutenant? I left it with Nurse Keating. Nice girl, good heart. What a hokey line.
Oh,
So there's this the basic narrative that we're getting from the Gemini killer here throughout this kind of last act of this film is that Pazuzu
yeah.
is in the body of this
Mother
girl.
Karras. Oh, yeah. In the,
No,
yeah,
he
I
was in
body
the
of
body
Reagan.
of Regan. He was
Yeah.
supposed to he was supposed to infect. Let's see if I get this right. The plan was he was supposed to infect Max von Sydow, the
Yes,
Exorcist.
because he
But
had like an old score to settle with him.
yes, but Max von Sydow had to go and die of a heart attack.
He had a heart attack.
So then he thinks, well, here's this other dumb priest, Father Karras, that
And
he
Father
jumps.
Karras kind of like takes it. Well, I always saw it as like Father Karras is like, infect me, like those last moments of The Exorcist. He's like, infect me, spare this girl.
Right. Yes.
I'll take this demon.
And the demon and Pazuzu at this point,
Like,
according to
okay, sure,
Gemini,
why
is
not?
like, sure, why not? I mean, because the whole
A
idea was
priest. Yeah.
you want to, if you can possess the body of the priest, you possess the body of the church and you do the
Yeah.
thing and whatever else.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I will take over the world. And, but then fucking Father Karras is like, no, let me hurl myself to my own death.
Jumps out the window. And in the last shots of The Exorcist, we see him dying on the
Hmm.
steps, but we see his hands still kind of moving.
Yeah. So as Karras, he says, as Karras was slipping out of his body, I was slipping into his body. And basically, I get I guess, don't know entirely how the Gemini killer thing ties into all of this.
Well, I think it's like he says, he's a serial killer. So like he goes to hell and
Uh-huh.
hell sucks, but the demons kind of like him because he was a serial killer. So he's like,
Oh,
they're
that's right.
like,
Yeah.
hey,
It's not
hey,
Pazuzu in the body. It is literally the
no,
Gemini killer is
that's
in
it.
Karras's body. Yes. Okay.
They're like, okay, so do you want to go do like a little thing for me? So they send him up, they slip him in. But the problem is that Father Karras was dead for a while,
Uh-huh.
enough time that there is like brain damage.
Uh-huh.
And this is where like, I mean, very, like on the nose with the Tony Kushner thing, he gets very medically accurate description. He's like, we are bodies made of molecular structures and meat. And here's the thing, I can only do so much in a brain that's been brain dead for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So there was some, and oh my God, this whole thing, and like he describes like the sort of the chuckle, the sort of dark humor of bringing this body back to life and
Uh-huh.
scaring the priest that was burying him. So you imagine there's this like he's crawling out of the grave. He then wanders the streets in this catatonic stupor because even though he knows he's the Gemini killer, the body he's in is essentially a zombie
Yeah.
for years.
So
And
he's
it's
got a
only until recently that he's
uh-huh.
been able to like connect the wiring
Uh-huh.
to like make the shit work.
So for 15 years, basically, until the last 6 weeks, he's basically just been living in a catatonic body.
Yeah.
It's just
He's been
this.
rattling around inside this brain dead body.
And Father Karras is apparently in there too, being able
Yes.
to see all of the murdering he's been doing.
That's the ultimate because that's the thing about the exorcism. The idea is that like there's a demon in there with you, but you're also in there, but you're sort of suppressed.
Yeah. And he also says too that he got Dr. Temple to help him, but then Dr. Temple couldn't take the pressure anymore, offed himself. But he's like, was Temple getting you out of the cell? Who gets you out? Just old friends.
Old friends.
So we also get the idea
Huh?
that he's able to leap bodies, but only
Yes.
into certain. He really can only get into the bodies of these older people with
Yes.
dementia. Like he needs
Yeah.
a person with a very weak mind
Yeah.
that won't
People
know
that are
that he's
asleep,
there. Yes.
people that with dementia,
Hmm.
things like that.
Okay. So he there's a moment wherein Karras looks back. He says, but Gemini Killer says, "Oh, God, I'm so tired though. So go deal with this other shit, and I'm gonna get some rest." And he like Kinderman leans over him and looks at him, and it's the body of Karras. And he was like, "Oh my God!" He's like, "Damien," but then Gemini Killer sits back up. And he's like,
Ah.
"No, little Jack Horner." I don't know what that's a
Oh.
reference to, But the very next thing, so it's a close up on Brad Dourif's face right in the camera, shouting an evil voice. And the very next words, as we cut to the next scene, is somebody is like, "It's child's play, Lieutenant." And I love that. It just
And
made
the
me
next
laugh.
scene is like a little redhead kid.
A little redheaded boy. Yeah.
They're like, "Oh
Uh,
my God, save this boy. This kid is clearly going to be the next
uh-huh.
victim."
And
Kinderman is like
it's,
walking all over the sort of the old people ward,
yes. And he's
not
remembering,
noticing
mhm.
that Miss Clelia is just fucking spider walking on the ceiling.
No one's noticing.
This is one of those like it is literally. I think this is the moment where I was like, something has gone awry in this movie. This moment, I kind of like the next scene, but then it's like from here on out, something has gone awry. Yeah,
This is the
Miss
spider
Clelia just like
walking.
in fast forward
Uh-huh.
and then just taking a moment to just like stop and look down at Kinderman and no one fucking, I mean, no one sees her.
Again, I like this in a different movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just the scares in this movie aren't this.
Yeah.
And I think to me, like if we compare it to another like procedural horror film in Silence of
Sure.
the Lambs,
Yeah.
this is a little bit like this is a little bit like at the end of the movie, like learning that Buffalo Bill has like a laser shooter goggle like
Yeah.
Cyclops
Oh,
from the
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
X-Men or something.
Yeah.
You're like, what? This is dumb. That's
You're
not
like,
this
what?
movie.
Huh? Yeah. Like it would almost have been better if like Mrs. Clelia had like a one more interview with Mrs. Clelia and she
Uh,
had dropped some information that connected the clues. Like
yes.
that's what this needed to be, as opposed to like fast forward ceiling spider walking.
And I know they're trying to fill the scene visually because what this
Sure.
scene is Kinderman just meandering about thinking
Yeah.
about what the Gemini killer said to him, and he's piecing things together because he was saying things like, "I'm a traveling man. These
Yeah. I'm
some of
always
these
on. Yeah.
people
Yeah.
have very weak minds, blah blah blah." And he's
I'm
like,
always moving.
"I'm always moving," and he realizes, oh shit, he's able to jump
Yeah.
bodies into
And
the
it
weak-minded.
and it also like it also does kind of explain, quote unquote, like how like what it must look like the devil can operate these people in like high speed mode or something
Uh-huh.
like on 2XL, you
Right.
know. So like that's how he's able to do these like highly intricate murders in the span of like half an hour, 45
Sure.
minutes
Uh-huh.
or something. So like we're getting a visual representation of that. Okay, sure. I
Uh-huh.
suppose so.
Fine.
But then it also just kind of doesn't make sense with what we're about to watch, which is the devil in the body of another woman
Uh-huh.
who like kills a nurse, takes her uniform, is in a taxi cab, clearly with the head clippers.
Uh-huh.
And we, like Kinderman thinks that they're going after this boy, right? So we see the outline of a body of a nurse walk into the boy's room with the bag, and Kinderman's like, no, and turns on the light, and it's Nurse Allerton. She's like, what the fuck are you doing? I'm just giving this kid some toys. And the words like, do you want to dance? Do you like the dance? He's like, oh my God, it's my daughter
Yep.
that loves to dance that he's going after. So we had this like high speed. It wasn't a 90s movie unless it had a high speed car chase.
No. But also I want to say I love another great quiet jump scare, quiet scare in this movie as he's running to the phone, and then we see at home his wife
Yes.
answers the phone and we just see her
Yes.
side of the conversation. She's like, "Oh, hi
She's like,
Bill.
oh, hey,
Oh,
babe.
well
Yeah.
that's weird. Okay. Well, if you say so, sure."
Yeah. And
And
she's like, racist grandma's there and the daughter's there. And she's like,
yeah.
I don't know, it was Bill. He said that there's a nurse coming over for some reason.
Yeah, but
But
before that, it cuts to Bill while she's still on the phone, and you just see Lieutenant Kinderman on the phone, and he's getting a busy signal.
oh my God, like fucking terrifying. Like that's some
So
scary
good.
shit.
That's where this movie is so good. I love Mrs. Clelia spider crawling on the
Oh my
ceiling at
God.
4x speed, but just in a different film.
Yes.
It-
Yes.
anyways, also a great scary nurse thing. Like I was getting I started thinking of Heath Ledger's Joker in the
Oh, for
second
sure.
Dark Knight film.
Yeah.
The way that this woman walks, she's dressed as a nurse, this older woman.
Yeah.
She is this actor. Oh, this is a well-known actor. Who did I? Who is my who is my nurse X here? Vivica Lindfors. She just is like a classic film
Yeah.
actor, but she is, she is playing a madman inside the
Yeah.
body of a woman with dementia.
Yeah.
And so the way she moves looks like a fleshy mech, fleshy kaiju, right? Right?
Yeah.
And it's just
Yeah. Like
it's
she's
so good.
cosplaying as a human.
Yes. So good. So we get the we get the police chase, we see the nurse ringing the doorbell, the cop and
Kinderman
Kinderman
pulls up, gun drawn,
gun
and
drawn.
he's like, go to the back, to the other police officer. And I love it. It's like this huge climax, right? This like huge build up. The daughter answers, she's like, hey, Dad, what's up?
Even though he's got
So
his gun
really,
drawn. Yeah.
and
Yep.
she doesn't even notice. Doesn't even notice.
Uh so good. That's actually creepy too, of like, wait, what's happening? And
Right?
then there's and the nurse is sitting there at the table, and mom is essentially saying like, the nurse showed up, but like, what's going on with her? Because she
Yeah,
just like
what's going on with
passed
this
out
weird
the
nurse?
moment
She
she
walked in. Yeah,
arrived.
she walked in, she passed out. What's happening with her? And
What's
what
going
is she?
on?
She's like she what does she say? She's like, I'm tired, or she says something very like non-creepy, but like almost as if like the old woman is like the nursing patient is coming out again.
Right. Um. Yeah. I don't remember exactly what she says there, but she definitely gives the vibe of Gemini killer left the body for some reason,
Yeah, just for a second,
just for a second.
but not before. And then like kind of snaps back in,
Uh huh.
grabs those shears,
Uh huh.
jumps after the daughter.
We see the shears reach around her neck just
Yeah.
as racist Granny pushes her out of the way.
Like racist Granny like grabs her by her hair and
That's right.
pulls her head out
That's
of the
right.
jaws of the shears. And what's crazy is that it's the way it's shot almost looks like a Tim Burton movie. Like it
Yeah.
looks like Beetlejuice. It looks like it's done in like claymation
Uh huh.
just because of the film speed that they use because it happens so fast. But then,
Uh huh.
right? But then, Gemini killer Pazuzu Grandma just goes like, "Rah!" And then falls in slow motion to the ground
Uh huh.
because at that very moment, Father Morning, remember him, who's not
Uh
been in
huh.
this movie at all since his bird died, just happened to know that the devil was in town and is at the bottom of this Georgetown hotel or this Georgetown hospital. And he shows up at patient 11 that sort of sucks the devil back into the body.
Yes. Which saves the family.
Yeah. Do you know what? You know what movie owes a lot to this movie?
What?
Long legs.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
I do. Yeah. You finally saw Long Legs, I
I did.
presume.
I did.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll get to that on an episode of this show one
I
day.
still feel dirty. My brain feels dirty. But like no spoilers for Long Legs, but there you can like that movie owes a lot to this
Mm-hmm.
film
Mm-hmm.
in this
Very much
sequence.
so. Very much so. So he
The big
gets snapped
showdown.
back to cell 11. Gemini Killer does. And he's got a showdown with Father Morning, who is
An
Father.
experienced exorcist.
Yep. And starts reading from his exorcism book. It's very similar to the showdown in the first
Yep.
exorcism, wherein you've got a very serious priest and you've got a devil in another body cackling at him, laughing at him,
Yeah.
making fun of, oh, the Lord's Prayer. That's really going to work,
Yeah.
dumbass.
Yeah.
Saying
Like,
shit
oh,
like that.
how do my children feel
Yeah.
whispering at your fucking feet? And it's like there's snakes everywhere. There's snakes
Uh-huh.
crawling all over him. Flames
So
and snakes.
at one point in time, the Gemini killer causes the book to just blow up.
Yeah.
Blows up his exorcism
Then
book
blows up his
and just
Bible.
blows up his Bible and blasts him up to the ceiling. And he's
And
stuck
then
to the
like
ceiling.
and then sticky fly papers him to the ceiling
Yes.
so that he has to like pull. It is very Hellraiser too. Like the this end, this end.
It
Because
is
it's
be
like the anatomical horror of watching this priest try to like pry his fucking face and his arm off the ceiling. And
yeah.
then also the sort of multi-dimensional hell aspect of it is very Hellraiser. So
Yeah.
like lightning, like a fucking Tesla coil starts hitting the ground,
Uh-huh.
knocking pieces of concrete out, and essentially creating a pit to hell
Uh-huh.
in which dead souls, the young boy crucified on a fucking oars are there. Like this club has everything.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so I don't really know the physics of how he gets like torn out of his own skin to fall
I
to the
unknown.
floor. Who knows? And I
But it
just
kind of makes it seems like Father Morning has lost the battle. Like he was doing
yes.
really good until the devil stuck him to the ceiling and then tried to peel him back off again.
Yep. I was I all I was thinking during the scene was I got a new Easy Pass in the mail and they're like you have to
Oh yeah.
remove your old one and mail it back. So I was like, well, let's gotta get the stickies off of this
Yeah, I know.
motherfucker and just
Yeah. A
this how do I get this shit off my windshield? And anyways. So
little bit of rubbing alcohol, take you
yeah,
right out. Just like
that's
rubbing
right.
alcohol, just right off.
Oh, I bet that would feel good for Father Morning. Someone to come in to
Oh,
splash
ow.
rubbing
Oh, it
alcohol.
stings. It stings my brain pan.
So Kenderman gets back to the hospital. He finds Father Morning bloodied on the ground.
Yep.
He draws his gun on the Gemini killer, but again, he gets psychically slammed against the far wall.
He's got to have a last monologue
Mm-hmm.
because there's been this whole thing of like, ever since the opening sequences with Kinderman and Father Dyer is like, God is love. God has a plan. We're all spirits. We'll meet at the end of the universe. And Kinderman's like, I'm a fucking DC cop.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe, you know what I believe in? The worst. People are the worst. God is the worst. It's all bad.
Mm-hmm.
So this kind of comes through like Kinderman has this quote crisis of faith throughout this movie. And Pazuzu, Gemini killer Kara says, have I helped you with your faith?
Uh-huh.
Which kind of launches Kinderman to this monologue. You know what you did? You actually fucking did. I believe in depravity and murder and shit and filth. And he just like goes on this tirade of all these horrible things. And I think you're the cause of them all. And fuck you. Fuck the horse you rode in on. You suck.
Yeah. He's like, ultimately,
You
I
suck, devil.
believe in you because
Yeah.
I
Like
believe
I,
cruelty, death, injustice, iniquity, pain, infidelity all exist, and I believe in you.
you're the cause of it.
And then lightning bolts rip open the floor.
That's crazy. This is such a different, it's like a movie that didn't, what? It's so wild to me.
It just really is like it's like getting could bring it back to the clean comic thing. It's like getting to the end of Jim
Yeah,
Gaffigan's
yeah, yeah,
set,
yeah.
and then he starts doing Andrew Dice Clay jokes.
Yeah. And you're like, whoa,
We're like,
okay, now,
whoa, hey,
yeah,
whoa,
ay, ay,
pal,
ay. Yeah.
yay.
Saved it all for the end, I guess.
And then here comes the crucifix made of ores with
Yep.
the body of the black child with the minstrel face Jesus head on top.
Yep.
Then that figure transforms into Father Karras.
Yeah.
And then suddenly the room returns back to normal. The Father Karras said something to, he's telling Bill to go, like, get out of here.
Yeah.
Telling him to go. Is that right? Is that what he
Meanwhile,
shouts? Yeah.
what's like, and meanwhile, Father Morning lying in a puddle in the corner a single spotlight lights up his crucifix. So there's still like a little ray of hope.
Uh-huh.
And he kind of grabs his crucifix and he says some priesty kind of stuff.
Save the servant. It's that
That's it.
speech.
Yes,
Yeah.
kind of finishes the exorcism. We finally have this priest finishes the exorcism.
Uh-huh. And he says he knows that Damien Karras is
Yeah.
inside the the
Yeah, he's
body
like,
of
fight
yeah,
him,
fight him,
the
Damien,
whole
fight him.
thing.
And then in this moment, Bill is freed from the Lieutenant
Yeah.
Kinderman is freed from the wall, and we see the face of Father Karras, and he's like, Bill, kill me now, shoot now, and he
Right
fucking
now. Now's your
does.
shot.
Now's your
Yeah.
shot. Bam, bam, bam.
Dead. Dead.
And,
Shot him dead.
well, he says one more thing. He says, "We want Bill, now free me," and he shoots him in the
He
head.
shoots him
We
like
don't
in
see
the head.
that, but we see the gun go to his head.
Shot of the sun,
Uh-huh.
and then a shot of a bunch of priests' graves.
Uh-huh.
Father Karras finally gets his hallowed ground burial.
Uh-huh.
The end.
The end. I
I want to see the police procedural on
I,
what the fuck happened in that room.
right?
How does he explain that to Nurse Allerton, to the head of the fucking hospital? There's a burnt out Bible. There's a dead priest. There's two dead priests. There's one that they thought was dead 15 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Now, oh, that's who that is. There's another dead priest. What the fuck?
With half of his skin torn off on the
Yeah.
backside.
But they're like, you know what? Exorcism. We're gonna chalk this down. In the police procedural boxes, it's like, homicide, manslaughter, exorcism, dot dot dot.
Yeah. Uh, shall we rate this movie?
Yes, let's.
Okay. A quick cleanup. I meant earlier, right as I said it, I knew I had the wrong word. I said kaiju and I meant mecha.
Oh,
So that's what I
okay.
meant
There
to
you
say.
go.
That she didn't look like a sea monster. She looked like a person operating a giant robot.
I mean, she
Uh,
did look a little,
a
maybe
little
Godzilla, Mothra-ish. Who
of the
knows?
60s era Godzilla
Yes,
movies. She didn't look like a
absolutely.
person in a rubber suit jostling around Tokyo. Okay, how approachable is this movie on a scale of 1 to 10? 1 being the least approachable, 10 being the most approachable if you're horror film averse. Like, I might give The Exorcist 3 like 3 out of 10 Spaceballs references. Did you
Yeah.
catch May the Schwartz be
No.
with you?
Yes, he did say, "May the Schwartz be with you." Oh my God. Oh,
Unbelievable.
Father Dyer, you crazy fool.
And again, other than this like very ending scene, it's not gory. Like the
No.
extent of the gore is like blood trickling out from under a door.
Yeah.
But the
I
jump
mean,
scares are
what they're
many.
describing are fucking crazy.
The descriptions of violence, the verbal descriptions are very strong. The jump scares are rock solid. Both the noisy fake ones and even more so like the very quiet jump scares. And I think it's a very tense procedural too.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm gonna say 3 out of 10. Spaceballs references. It's a pretty solid, fucking scary ass movie. Cecil, just as a horror film, not to speak of approachability, how do you rate this?
I would give this movie, this is a tough one because I think it's really scary. I remember really liking it as a kid because it was a horror movie that had a little bit of class to it at a
Uh huh.
time when horror movies maybe weren't
Uh
terribly
huh.
classy. It was like, it does that thing in which it's a sequel that is not better than the original, but kind of stands on its own.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it references the original for sure, but it is scary in its own right and doesn't just do the same thing as the first one. So it's like the ending's kind of a little silly. So I'm like 7.5
Yeah.
chest cavities full of rosaries.
Perfect.
That's my rating.
Let's figure out what movie we will watch next. You've got a scare die. I've got a style die. We'll roll those up and see what movie fits those two things. So, Cecil, on your scare die, if you roll a 1, our next movie scare is Altered States. 2, Technology. 3, Wild Card. 4, Mother Earth. 5, Toys and or Puppets. 6, A Psycho Killer. What's our scare, Cecil?
Two,
Technology.
technology.
Okay,
Got some
let's
weird
match up.
science up in here.
Let's match up your technology scare with the style that I roll. If I roll a one, our style is something that is in and around college or university. If I roll a two, it's got to have a one word title. Three, it's got to be a sequel, prequel, or remake. Four, Giallo or something Giallo ish. Five, something from the 1960s. Or six, a splatter film. All right, let's see what we got here. I've got a five from the 1960s technology.
Okay. Wow, the dice are giving us an unusual one this week.
They are.
We
So
got some good ones. We've got some we pulled some out here though, I will say.
I think a lot of these came from you adding these to the list, Cecil. Would you like to talk about the ones that we have on our list? We also have, while Cecil's looking those up, I'll tell you that if you don't already know, we have a Letterboxd account. We're at Random Horror 9 there, and you can look up our lists. And we put up lists of all the possible die rolls we could get. And, if you want to participate, just add some comments of other movies you think would fit those potential die rolls. So I'm going to pull those up and we'll see what people had to say about technology from the 1960s in horror films.
So the first one we have is Peeping Tom. Now this
Hmm.
one is like classic. Came out the
This
same
is
year as
Pressburger, actually.
Pressburg and Powell. Yep.
Yeah.
Came out the same year as Psycho, about a psycho killer who has a fetish for liking to watch. So the technology is definitely the sort of the film camera.
Hmm.
Um, Great movie. 2001, A Space Odyssey, Stanley Kubrick.
Hmm.
I mean, we're like hitting there's some greats here. About a lot of things, but one of the things that it is about is a spaceship that tries to kill people.
Of
So technology, definitely. We also have the classic movie, The Time Machine.
course.
It's kind of like more sci-fi, but definitely for the 1960s, I felt like this earned a place because this kind of like lent sci-fi horror kind of like one of the different worlds he goes to kind of leads into that.
Hmm.
We also have the movie The Brain That Wouldn't Die, 1962 film. This looks schlocky as hell and super fun. Dr. Courtner and his fiance are driving to the lab when they get into a horrible accident. Compton is decapitated,
Okay.
but Dr. Courtner is not phased and decides to bring her brain back to life. Like this, I think typifies sort of the 1960s approach to like mad scientist horror in a lot of ways, in that sort of like what the late 50s and 60s were about. So schlocky fun.
Hmm.
Let's see. There's one movie that I found called The Sorcerers that looks kind of interesting. This one is from 1967. Boris Karloff, one. A sinister story of mind control in which an amiable old professor creates a device enabling one person to direct the thoughts of another and experience the sensations they feel. And they use a young man as a guinea pig for his experiment that he and
Interesting.
his wife live out their twisted fantasies. So maybe a little
Interesting.
like psychoerotica
Okay.
slash empathy ray. I don't know,
Yeah.
something. Let's see. What else do we have here? 1967 film called Torture Garden. Oh, Jesus, this looks wild. But it has Jack Palance, Peter Cushing, Burgess Meredith, Sideshow Psychic predicts horrific futures of some curious fairground visitors. Um, Essentially finds out there's going to be like a murder. I don't know why I put down technology here. I'm not quite sure what
Huh.
I was thinking with that one. Oh,
Interesting.
because it's I think it's kind of like it's an anthology one, and I think maybe I read that one of them has some sort of technology. I don't know. That's a maybe. And then lastly, one that I put on here is Planet of the Vampires, which is like again kind of a schlocky hallmark. People in spacesuits go to a planet that's vampires, very MST3K. But again, technology, horror,
Uh-huh.
Planet of the Vampires. I don't know. That's what I came up with,
Oh,
or
those
we
are
came up.
great. Let me look on our letterbox. Let's see here what people had to say. Adding to it. Ilian, Seconds Peeping Tom would be great for this one. Weaponized Toaster throws out X, the man with the X-ray eyes,
Ooh, that sounds fun.
1967. Scientist
That's
develops
Don Rickles.
Whoa! Scientist develops a method to extend the range of his vision, which results in unexpected complications. Oh, I'm
Sounds cute.
expecting complications.
I hope for complications.
Little Uggy throws out a handful of 60s movies. Doctor Strangelove, just
Sure.
talked about that today. Fahrenheit 451.
Fahrenheit 451, that's a good one.
That is
You know,
good.
I've never seen it.
Is
I've
it
never seen it.
tech? I don't think I remember reading the book, but it's been forever. Is there a
I've never read it, never
technology
seen it.
scare? I know that there's book burning,
That's about I
but
like, but I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
and then Invasion of the Star Creatures.
Oh dear.
So those all sound very solid, like 60s sci-fi. Suspicious Beings gives us Seconds from 1966. Secret organization offers wealthy people a second chance at life by surgical alteration
Oh
with Rock
my.
Hudson. Little Uggy also gives us The Sorcerers, which you gave us too. The Sorcerer sounds really intriguing. This sounds
Yeah.
really interesting.
Because it sounds a little bit more subversive than a lot of
Mm-hmm.
60s horror.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, just maybe.
Monstrum wants to hear us cover 2001: A Space Odyssey. Miles Reed Lobato gives us the Peter Cushing Doctor Who films, Doctor Who and the Daleks, and Daleks Invasion Earth 2150. Okay. I didn't even know about these movies. I didn't.
Yeah,
Oh, that's interesting. Uh, Volatile Spider, please do Doctor Strangelove.
sure.
Robert Baroness, Eyes Without a Face. Oh, Robert Baroness, we have covered that for our
It's
Patreon. It
on the
is
Patreon. Eyes without a face.
it's one of our wilder Patreons because we recorded it in like Prague. We were on tour together, and
Poland?
were we in Poland? I forget. Were we
I
in
think we're in
Warsaw?
Poland.
Wherever
But
we
we actually
were.
got to sit next to each other
Yeah.
and talk about a movie. And we were so slap happy about after driving across the length of Prague or the length of Poland.
Yep.
It was actually a pretty fun one.
That
So
was a fun
subscribe
one.
to Patreon for all of that.
Mm-hmm. Ganymede's Cup gives us Colossus, the Forbin Project. Technically 1970 release. Uh, let's see here. Thinking this will prevent war, the US government gives an impenetrable supercomputer total control over
Oh
launching
my.
nuclear missiles. I bet the
Uh-oh.
computer does exactly what they want it to do and is totally fine.
Absolutely.
Sav seconds.
Seconds. Yeah.
Sarah Kendall gives us Island of Terror, 1966. Indestructible self-replicating bone vampire turtle things we accidentally
Brilliant.
grew in a lab while trying to cure cancer.
Love
Might
it.
be a type of technology.
Sure. I absolutely buy that.
Thank you,
Listen,
Sarah. Yes.
if you can grow a turtle vampire in a test tube, that is technology.
I can barely keep my African violet alive. So this is impressive to me. Fifth Hammerer gives us Sting of Death. College students travel to Florida on spring break. One of their fathers is a marine biologist at a party. Karen's friends, this girl, they turn to insult Dr. Richardson's assistant Egon, and soon a murderous jellyfish mutant begins a killing spree.
How does that happen?
I don't know.
You got to watch and find out.
More votes from Dee Dee the Shark for Peeping Tom in seconds. Ace Diamond, the brain that wouldn't die, which is
Yep.
one that you gave us. That sounds so bonkers. David Johnson, not horror, but the Manchurian Candidate has some scary ass technology.
Very true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And finally, How Do Monster gives us Seconding Strangelove and Seconding 2001. So,
Interesting. I don't know if I would have thought of Doctor Strangelove, but I guess it is. There is like a black comedy, and it's a dark enough comedy that could be considered horror.
uh-huh.
There's like a psychopath, there's world destruction.
What we have here is there are a handful of movies that I find really intriguing and really fit technology well and have horror-ish elements. Doctor
Sure.
Strangelove and 2001 both. I would never
Yeah.
really qualify either as horror,
Yeah.
But I think enough so I don't mind covering them for the show because I think we can.
No,
There's enough there that you can cover it with a horror lens and talk about it in that way. Um, I think like the one that probably fits the two that to me sort of fit the most might be uh Peeping Tom and maybe The Sorcerers.
I honestly, I think those are the two. Because here's the thing, there's a lot of funny, schlocky 60s technology. Like the brain that wouldn't die looks
Mm-hmm.
fun.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like Peeping Tom is such a like a film, like a Criterion Collection film.
Yeah.
And I kind of love it in conversation with Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho,
Uh-huh.
because essentially it's like a movie that was made outside of Hollywood that could show so much more sexual stuff and
Uh-huh.
murder stuff and just like, like didn't have the Hays Code like all over it. And then the thing about The Sorcerers is that it's a bit of an unknown to me. I'd never heard of it before, but it looks kind of sexy almost.
Uh-huh.
And definitely, I'm seeing a lot of people like I'm seeing a very handsome dude hooked up to like test tubes and brain scans and things like that.
Yeah.
So maybe that's like if we want to go more like maybe a little schlocky,
Yep.
but could have some interesting stuff in it,
Let me throw out one
or
more
the
if
like Criterion Collection.
if we want to throw out one more that I think
Mhm.
is would be interesting if we extend technology to include like procedures, right?
Sure.
Development of medical procedures. Seconds sounds really interesting too. It's a John Frankenheimer film
Oh, that's right.
with
Oh,
Rock
yeah.
Hudson.
It
Um,
almost looks like it looks very reminiscent of Eyes Without a Face. Like it's kind of that like Invisible Man. I don't
yes.
know. It looks kind of
This
interesting.
this is the same guy who did Manchurian Candidate and Birdman of Alcatraz. So
Oh.
this is the same director.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I'm kind of interested in that could be really fascinating too.
Oh, it's tough.
Um, Also interesting too. Let me pull up the hold on, I'm just pulling up oh, interesting. Okay, so the DP was a man named James for seconds. The DP is a man named James Wong Hao, who is Chinese born and I'm gonna guess is one of the first Chinese born cinematographers in
Interesting.
Hollywood. Won the
Sure.
Academy Award twice for cinematography for The Rose Tattoo and HUD.
Oh, damn.
Fascinating. Yeah. Um,
Okay. Here's the thing, Jeffrey. It sounds like seconds might be where it's at. Because look, we could go with the obvious choice, which I think is Peeping Tom.
totally. We've been
Like
talking
it's
about
been
Powell Pressburger this whole
we've been
show.
talking
Yeah.
like it's been on the list.
Uh-huh.
It's a great movie. But I feel like we've kind of been thrown this curveball in like technology in 1960s, like you probably wouldn't expect it. So maybe I think the choice is to do a curveball movie
Yeah.
and not the obvious choice.
I think so
And listen,
too. Yeah.
I'm kind of into this.
I'm kind of into it too, and I'm gonna say I don't know that I have knowingly watched a Rock Hudson film before.
Sure.
I'm just unfamiliar with the man's
Yeah.
oeuvre. So could be really, really interesting. And Frankenheimer's great, so I feel like we're gonna get a rock solid film out of this.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Thank you, Suspicious Beans, for giving us seconds as an idea. Oh, here's the thing. Let's just double check and make sure
Oh yeah.
people can watch it.
I think it is actually.
Yeah. Oh, it's Criterion and
Oh,
Canopy and
there you go.
It's on Pluto with ads. So yeah, let's check
Boo.
that shit out. Oh, that's a dope ass poster.
I know, right?
Really. Okay, well, great. Solved. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Cecil, for talking with me. And if you have thoughts on The Exorcist III or ideas for other movies that would have been good 1960s technology horror, let us know on Instagram at Random Horror 9 or on Patreon at Random Horror 9, where we have public discussion threads for each episode, and you don't have to be a paying member to participate. I can speak. And watch Seconds from 1966 with us this week. And come on back next Tuesday for a new episode. Have a restful night with no mother in law putting a live carp in your bathtub or nothing. Boo.
Boo.
Mhm.